Bring in show music, please.
Hi, I'm CNBC producer Katie Kramer. Today on Squawk Pod. Shutdown day or not?
The bill is not passed.
House Republicans with a midnight deadline and no plan B or C. Anger in the ranks on spending policy.
$110 billion unpaid for because you never have any ounce of self-respect.
The world's richest man pressing his influence. Our Emily Wilkins with the latest.
It's just not clear what actually can appease House Republicans, plus Trump, plus Elon Musk, and of course, plus Democrats.
But maybe there's a way. Republican Senator Markwayne Mullin joins us.
And I do think there's a path forward to avoid it for a set amount of weeks moving forward. We'll have the fight again in January.
Turns out Senator Mullen was talking to House Speaker Mike Johnson.
We're expecting votes this morning, so y'all stay tuned. We got a plan.
It's all coming together. Maybe. Then American whiskey tariffed at 50%, the plan in Europe that would surge prices on U.S. spirits. The CEO of Kentucky distillery Michter's, Joe Magliocco.
A lot of the industry wound up working with their local representatives in different countries to absorb part or even all of the price increases.
And the rest of today's news that got us squawking, from the changes at DJT Media to the TikTok ban of 2025.
The president-elect would like to use this as a chess piece in the larger conversation.
It is Friday, December 20th. Squawk Pod begins right now.
Stand Becky by in 3, 2, 1. Cue it, please.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Squawk Box right here on CNBC. We're live from the NASDAQ market site in Times Square. I'm Becky Quick, along with Andrew Ross Sorkin. Joe is off today.
On this vote, the yeas are 174, the nays are 235, one voting present, two-thirds not being in the affirmative. The rules are not suspended and the bill is not passed.
Very disappointing to us that all but two Democrats voted against aid to farmers and ranchers, against disaster relief, against all these bipartisan measures that had already been negotiated and decided upon.
The Musk-Johnson proposal is not serious. It's laughable. Extreme MAGA Republicans are driving us to a government shutdown.
Let's talk about the situation with the government, because that government funding bill backed by President-elect Trump and Elon Musk now failing in the Houses after 38 Republicans and all but 2 Democrats voted against it. We're now less than 18 hours away from an official government shutdown. I want to bring in Emily Wilkins. She is in Washington, D.C. She's got the latest. She's been working overnight, talking to everybody. Where are we?
I mean, Andrew, right now, there is just no plan on how to keep the government open past midnight tonight. And it's just not clear what actually can appease House Republicans, plus Trump, plus Elon Musk, and of course, plus Democrats. Because even though everything's trying in the Republicans' court right now, this bill, when it passes the House, if it passes the House, will need to actually pass the Senate. So the most recent deal that we saw last night, it did include more than $110 billion in disaster relief and assistance for farmers, but it cut most other items in the bill. We went from like a 1,500-page package to a 100-page package. But the big point of contention was something that was added, and that was that 2-year raise of the debt limit. Now, Democrats don't like it because it takes away some of their very limited leverage next year, but also a number of fiscal hawks on the Republican side didn't like it because they want to use the debate over the debt limit to reduce spending. Congressman Chip Roy, one of the lawmakers who voted against the bill, harshly criticized Republicans on the floor last night. Take a listen.
We're going to increase the debt by $5 trillion. That's what's going to happen right here by Republicans, increasing the debt $5 trillion. And what are you doing in the same bill? $110 billion unpaid for because you never have any ounce of self-respect.
A shutdown could have serious impacts on holiday travel, and the Pentagon warned last night that it also would result in troops not having pay over the holidays. And we'll be keeping obviously a close eye on Capitol Hill today to see if any kind of agreement emerges, and if they could even potentially pass it, maybe even over the weekend, and try to avoid the worst of a government shutdown.
Emily, in terms of just anything new between last night and this morning, is there any sense that if you took the debt ceiling piece of it off the table, meaning this 2-year temporary reprieve, if you will, or any of the other measures that you could get some kind of interest in getting something across the finish line?
I think right now all options are on the table, but that definitely does seem to be one of the biggest concerns. I mean, of course, Republicans will still say that some of the other parts of the bill aren't paid for. Democrats could still be upset that Republicans basically went back on what was a bipartisan and carefully negotiated agreement. I think it's going to become a question from the leadership, how much they're willing to give. And also, to a certain extent, the politics are coming in here. Last night, you saw Democrats leaving their meetings saying, look, Republicans are owning this. They're going to get blamed for the shutdown. But then you saw Vice President-elect J.D. Vance leaving the Capitol and saying, look, this is in the Democrats' court. The Democrats didn't vote for the bill that was just on the House floor, and they are going to be blamed for a shutdown. And he actually kind of alluded that he thought that a shutdown would be more likely than not at this point. So it's become a bit of a blame game here in Washington, D.C.
On a very practical level, you referenced this idea that maybe something could happen over the weekend. Could something happen over the weekend, or are all of these people headed home?
So, I mean, at this point, flights are booked. I know at least a couple members who have events today. I don't think they're going to make those events. I mean, the thing is, too, is that they all need to stay in D.C. because the margins are so incredibly narrow. And we're just going to have to see what happens today. I mean, we went into yesterday without a plan. They came up with a plan. It didn't work. Technically, they could come up with some sort of plan today and at least begin to move it. Or they might decide just to let the government go ahead and shut down and head home for the holidays. I think both options are on the table right now. But certainly you'll have a current Senate Minority Leader, top Republican, Mitch McConnell, who has always continually warned Republicans. He said, I've seen it time and time again. Every time there's a shutdown, Republicans get the blame. And certainly that would be a difficult thing for Republicans to have to start with when they come back in January with their trifecta, instead of starting off the gate with their new nominees, their reconciliation bills, their large packages on energy and border. They're going to have to be stuck dealing with this shutdown instead.
Yeah, I think this is an unforced error in a lot of ways. It is before President-elect Trump is even in office. But unfortunately, it shows how tenuous his grip on power is going to be. I think to this point, everyone has kind of looked at it and said, look, he won in an overwhelming landslide. He won he won the popular vote. He won the electoral vote. He won the House. He won the Senate. Clean sweep on all of these issues, but it shows that Republicans aren't walking in lockstep, and all of his big plans, the things that he would like to get done, would require that entire Republican majority to stick together. If you can't do it even before you're in office, it just shows that there's not necessarily going to be as much strength and as much ability to get things done. So insisting on these things now, again, may have just been an unforced error. I can understand why he doesn't want to have that debt ceiling vote. That every president who's come through, Republican, Democrat, has been kind of dealing with this weaponized issue. If you're going to spend, you should be allowed to do it. But this is a weapon that some Republicans have used pretty effectively in recent years, and they're not willing to put down their weapon just yet.
Yeah. And Becky, you're absolutely right. I mean, the biggest question for the next Congress is how much congressional Republicans are going to be going along with Trump. We saw a little bit earlier this week, Trump was able to easily kill a bill. He clearly still has a lot of sway on Capitol Hill and on his party. But as we saw last night with 38 Republican lawmakers basically turning their back on a bill that Trump endorsed, and Chip Roy doing all that too after Trump called him out on Truth Social, it shows that there is still a resistance in the Republican Party. They're not just going to fall in lockstep. And I think you can take that even from the election results. Yes, if you were looking at the presidential, a huge shift to the right, a huge shift in favor of conservative policies and away from the Biden administration. But if you really look at what the House and the Senate did, the Republicans lost seats in the House. They will have a smaller margin in January than they do now. And in the Senate, I mean, this was a really great Senate map for Republicans. But I mean, go talk to Sam Brown in Nevada, Carrie Lake in Arizona, Mike Rogers in Michigan, Eric Hovde in Wisconsin. I mean, all of these were Republican Senate candidates who lost in states where Trump won. So you are seeing a bit of a regulating impact on Congress and could easily see that, I think, for the next 2 years.
The threat of being primaried if you voted against that, is that an empty threat at this point with 38 of them voting that way?
That's a great question, Becky. I mean, certainly we have seen Trump come out against lawmakers that resulted in them losing. I mean, Congressman Bob Good is not going to be returning to Congress next year for that reason. I think the thing is that 2 years from now is a long way away. A lot is going to happen between then and now. And I think it's going to remain a big question whether or not you actually see Trump or see Musk go against some of these lawmakers and what that could actually result in and how successful they might be.
Okay. Emily, thank you. Appreciate it. Meantime, President-elect Trump transferring his entire stake of shares in Trump Media to a revocable trust, which he is the sole beneficiary. Now, regulatory filings showing that he made the move this week. He did not receive any money for the gift of his nearly 115 million shares to the trust, worth more than $4 billion as of yesterday's close. The filing says he now indirectly owns the shares. Trump's son, Donald Trump Jr., is the sole trustee and has sole voting and investment powers over the securities held by the entity. Before his first inauguration in 2017, he made similar transfers to the same revocable trust. And the question is whether that gives you some kind of separation from the assets themselves. I think when your children are running them, it's hard to say. That's actually so separate, but that's where we are.
You better stay on good terms with your kids if the kids are running it.
That's true. A new bipartisan push in Washington to extend the deadline for the ban on TikTok. Democratic Senator Ed Markey and Republican Senator Rand Paul urging President Biden to extend the January 19th deadline by 90 days, given the law's uncertain future in the Supreme Court. The senators also cited the potential consequences for free expression if the ban takes effect. The court will hear oral arguments on the matter on January 10th. So we'll see where that all goes.
You know, it's complicated because this isn't something that President Trump can come in and say, never mind, I'm overruling it. It's a law. Right. So if the Supreme Court rules in favor of the law, it has to be undone by Congress. So they may have bipartisan support, but when you see all of the issues roiling Congress today, the inability to even get this continuing resolution passed, I'm not sure how highly it would rank, although the
Trump
furor
might have
from
a better
people,
shot at getting this undone, though, than even this.
Yeah, right. But it's an interesting prospect. I hadn't really thought through a lot of the logistics of what this means. If the Supreme Court decides in their favor, and who knows how quickly the Supreme Court is going to decide on this, but they did not stay the law in the meantime. So if they don't come up with some resolution or some decision on this by the 19th, there's a lot in play and it's complicated and
but
things are not
think
clearly moving.
The president-elect would like to use this as a chess piece
I think that's
in the
right.
larger conversation.
I think that's
so
right.
if there's a way to get yourself 90 days or to get yourself anything, all of a sudden it changes the negotiating.
Yeah. It's going to be something to watch. It's going to get messy as we get down to the deadline.
What do you want to say, Mayor, about the supporters of Luigi, wearing Luigi costumes, supporters of Luigi across the country?
The beauty of this country is that you have the right to protest the right.
And suspected murderer Luigi Maggione is in New York facing federal charges in the death of the United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. He faces 11 counts in connection to the December 4th shooting of Thompson, including murder and terrorism charges, and was perp-walked in dramatic fashion yesterday with the mayor behind him. And can't tell, by the way, Becky, and I was curious if you had a view about it. There was part of me that thought it was very important to have a perp-walk like this because it hopefully demonstrates something to the public that, if you do something like this, you are going to be behind bars for a very, 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 very long time.
Yeah, and
maybe
I think
the rest of your life. But the flip side is every time there's video of him, there is, unfortunately, a outpouring from some parts of this country that seem to be supportive of him. And I just wonder whether there's like a martyrdom thing going on.
That's an interesting take on it. I hadn't thought about it. I do think you want to make sure, and the reason the prosecutors are going for such stringent charges on this, including a terrorism charge on this, is they want to send a message that this is something that we will prosecute to the fullest extent of the law. The video on it, you're probably right.
I don't know. It just had it was sort of a wild video to watch yesterday. It was like watching a movie.
Tease will be next.
Still to come on Squawk Pod, more on the push and pull of a lame duck president, a president-elect, and a certain billionaire. While a government shutdown looms for federal employees, the blame game and the path forward in D.C. with Republican Senator Markwayne Mullin.
If the Democrats don't support this deal, I don't know what to say. They're going to own the shutdown.
And news about a possible vote that emerged during our TV broadcast from CNBC's Emily Wilkins. She's hearing the frustration from the left side of the aisle.
They've been referring to Elon Musk as President Musk because of his campaign against this. And so there's a lot of frustration on the Democratic side.
Welcome back. This is Squawk Pod.
Up and Andrew, Q.
You're watching Squawk Box on CNBC. I'm Andrew Sorkin, along with Becky Quick. Joe is off today.
Joining us right now with the latest in the government funding fight is Republican Senator Markwayne Mullin. And Senator, thank you very much for being with us today. I think we're trying to figure out what's happening in Washington. Hopefully you have a better idea than we do from here. There's some market turmoil this morning. Not all of this because of what's happening in Washington. A lot of it's the Federal Reserve and what we had seen. But the threat of a budget, a government shutdown really is roiling people. And what can you tell us about what you know is happening at this point?
Well, Becky, trying to figure out where Congress is going all the time is difficult. One thing you can guarantee is we will always wait till the last minute to get anything done. I think we're probably going to avoid a government shutdown, mainly because we're pushed up against Christmas here. There's a chance today a clean CR, a short-term clean CR. It may be for 2-3 weeks. That'll get pushed out from one of the chambers. That's probably the closest path forward. That was something that was discussed late last night, even some discussions this morning. I'm not going to say that's going to happen, but that's really the option that's on the table. Other than that, there's a couple other options. There's an option that was proposed that I was working on weeks ago with President Trump and with some Senate Democrat colleagues, taking the 10 appropriation bills that are left now that we're not Homeland hasn't been reported out of committee. NDA has been passed. We got the other 10 appropriation bills that was passed out of committee by unanimous support and has been reported to the floor since July, and Schumer has literally refused to move them. We could take all that language that has all the riders, all the extensions, and add disaster on top of it. The language is already written. It was bipartisan. Put it on the floor, add debt limit, 2-year extension on it, and pass it. And that would clean the deck for the outgoing Biden administration and set up Trump to be able to just work on the FY26 when he gets in office. I think that's a great plan, but Schumer scrapped that last week and said no deal. Yeah,
It's just so confusing what has happened. We thought that you all had a bipartisan deal that was going to get worked out. It turned out that Elon Musk didn't want that to happen because of the issues they're trying to do with government efficiency and really stopping spending. And then there were 38 Republicans in the House who voted against what President Trump had supported yesterday. I think we're all just trying to figure out what works and what doesn't. And I understand that you were talking with President-elect Trump last week about a plan, but that plan doesn't sound like it would now pass muster because the Democrats, you're going to have trouble getting support from Democrats at this point, too. And I don't know if the Republicans in the House, even if can find a way that they'll have something that all Republicans would vote for.
Well, Becky, I disagree that Trump disengaged last week. He's been engaged literally since he won the election.
I didn't say he disengaged. I didn't say he disengaged. He may have been negotiating with you on this. But the plan that he supported yesterday did not get passed by his own party.
I agree with that. But President Trump had negotiated with the White House, had been negotiating with us. I'd been negotiating with my colleagues on the Senate side. We had a deal worked out, and it was something that was agreeable. Schumer's the one that backed out to begin with it. So to say that Elon weighed in on it just surprised everybody. That's not accurate. Everybody was upset.
Okay, so you have a different plan that was working its way through the Senate versus the one that was working its way through the House. Okay,
it had worked its way, and then some changes had to be made because Schumer pulled away from it. The deal that Speaker Johnson was trying to work out was a very difficult deal because our number one goal is to raise the debt limit now. How about we do something inventive? How about Congress be proactive rather than reactive? We know this fight on this debt limit is going to take place. What can happen if we wait, and you know this will happen, you'll see it on your show, Come March, if we haven't really had negotiations about raising the debt limit and they start doing the special levers that they pull to keep the government open, what's going to happen is the stock market is going to get volatile again. You could see our currency start talking about taking a devaluing, and then you're going to start seeing a possibility of us defaulting, and that would be horrible. That's not what we want to do.
It was Chip Roy, who's a Republican in the House, and others, 37 others, who voted against that raising the debt limit.
Well, we could go back, Becky, to the original deal we had, but the reason why it was pulled is because Schumer wants to use that as and no, I'm not trying to be ugly here, but basically as a weapon to hold to the president's head next year to negotiate, because that's his negotiating tool.
It's been a weapon that either party has used when it's not in the White House.
But we don't have to do that right now.
It's not a huge thing that I'm a fan of and never have been, because it's a silly way of saying we're not going to pay the bills that we've already agreed to the spending on.
I don't disagree with that, Becky, at all, but it shouldn't be used to hold the economy hostage, and that is what Schumer is trying to do, is hold the economy hostage. Why wouldn't we just agree with this? It's what's best. Not to mention President Trump, the reason why he wants this so bad is because President Trump ran on the fact that he wants to get the economy started again. We're in this situation, once again, is because the Biden administration spent too much. They had a lagging economy, and the GDP wasn't able to keep up their spending. So the issue we're in is it's because the bad policies that the Biden administration put us here. So now that they got us here, how about we negotiate out and get this thing behind us, and we can actually start and get this economy going back again? Getting the debt limit cleared would be the perfect opportunity to do it. And I don't understand, other than the fact that Schumer wants to hold this as a negotiating tool or as a weapon to the president's head in his next administration. That's not good. That's not good for our economy. That's not good for American people. That's putting party before politics.
Senator, obviously there's going to be a big blame game about whatever happens.
That's
I
true.
would just ask, what do you say to the government employees who may ultimately get furloughed if this does not get resolved? And what kind of expectations do you have around what happens over the next two weeks, let's say, if in fact, the folks at the TSA are not getting paid and, so much of the country is traveling, or, there's just going to be so many component parts to this.
Right.
Do you actually see a path that gets you there? And what do you tell all those employees? By the way, many of whom I imagine, if DOGE is successful, may ultimately not have jobs anyway.
Well, first of all, I have been through these shutdowns before, unfortunately. They're never good. But I've never seen a federal employee not get back pay. Even the ones that got furloughed still got back pay. And some of them got back pay actually with overtime put in place. So every one of them is going to get paid. I just hate that there's even a question there, especially over Christmas when they're going to have bills coming due or they still got Christmas gifts to pay. Republicans and Democrats can agree, we all want to avoid the shutdown. However, we have to get our house in order, because this is going to catch us one way or the next. And so this fight is going to happen now, Andrew, or it's going to happen in July. I'm one of these guys that if I'm going to get in a fight, let's just get it over with so we can move on. Why wait when you see it coming anyways? And we see this fight happening. Because you're going to have colleagues who want to go home for the holidays. Well, I know that we have colleagues wanting to go home. I promise you, we have federal employees that probably want to go home that works up here on Capitol Hill. We all want to go home for Christmas. I have 6 kids there. I want to go home too. But let's do this.
But you'd rather have the fight now and get it done. All right, let me tell you very quickly, Senator. The Hill is just reporting that Speaker Mike Johnson in the House is saying that Republicans have arrived at a plan C to avert a shutdown, and the House will vote on Friday morning on the legislation. Are you aware of this? Do you know what the details
I do
are?
that. Yeah, that's kind of what I alluded to before when I first came on the show. I mean, when we first started talking when I came on. I believe there's a path forward here. I don't want to release the details. That's the Speaker's office. We're obviously in conversation. I found myself in a very fortunate position to be able to have good relationships on the House and the Senate and with the President elect President Trump. So these conversations we've been privy to, and I do think there's a path forward to avoid it for a set amount of weeks moving forward.
You think that is something that will require both Republican and Democratic votes?
It will. It will. It'll require both of us to work together. And I believe you're going to have enough Republicans and Democrats to support it. If the Democrats don't support this deal, I don't know what to say. They're going to own the shutdown.
I'm guessing this is something that basically just kicks the can down the road a couple of weeks.
Of course. Yes.
Yeah. So a couple of weeks and we'll be back with the same deal.
We'll have the fight again in January.
Okay. Senator Mullen, thank you for your time today. We appreciate it.
So you got to vote today? Yeah, we're expecting votes this morning, so y'all stay tuned. We got a plan.
You've reached a new agreement?
We'll see.
We are just hours away from a federal government shutdown, and now we've got some new developments out of Washington, D.C. Emily Wilkins joins us right now with the latest details. Emily, this is kind of coming fast and furious.
Yes, Becky, things are moving very rapidly in Washington. We just had Speaker Mike Johnson arrive at the Capitol and tell reporters that there will be a vote this morning. The question is on what? Johnson said to basically stay tuned for details. Remember, he has got to come up with a plan that is not only going to need to get all Republicans on board, but also have the approval of Trump and also now have the approval of Elon Musk, since it's clear that he is holding a lot of sway over this new dynamic of Congress. Plus, anything that they have to come up with, it's going to have to pass the Democratic-controlled Senate, which just has a lot of questions about exactly what it's going to look like. Now, Johnson is now in a meeting with members of the House Freedom Caucus. Those include a lot of the 38 Republicans who voted on the House floor last night to basically sink what we were referring to as Plan B, that slimmed-down spending bill that included the 2-year extension of the debt limit. I've talked to other lawmakers who are also concerned about this debt limit increase, and yet Trump has said that that's the thing he wants in the bill because he doesn't want to deal with it during his presidency. He wants them to deal with it during Biden's. And you're seeing another similar tune from Trump this morning, posting on Truth Social just minutes ago that if there's going to be a shutdown of the government, he's okay with it so long as it happens under Biden's term. Of course, what that means is that after January 20th, there is going to have to be a way to figure out how to solve that with the Republican trifecta if they can't get a solution within the next couple weeks. That, of course, could interfere with a lot of things that Republicans were hoping to do in the first 100 days. This includes, of course, nominating all of Trump's cabinet, getting started on some of those border security and energy and tax packages. At this point, I think there's just a lot of confusion in D.C. about exactly what is going to happen. If Speaker Johnson has a plan that's able to get through the House and the Senate, we might see a small weekend shutdown. But there's also the potential, because there seems to be a growing drumbeat, that this could actually be a much longer shutdown that could go into next year. Guys?
We were just talking with Senator Markwayne Mullin, a Republican from Oklahoma, who said that he's had talks with Speaker Johnson about this. He didn't give us all the details because he didn't want to steal Speaker Johnson's thunder on any of this, but he made it sound like this would be something that would just be a 2 to 3 week package that would basically kick the can down the road, say we're going to pick this up when we come back from the holidays. We will extend so the government doesn't shut down so that they can basically all go home for the holidays. That was something he said that would probably require Democratic votes as well. What do you think the likelihood is, Emily, of something like that passing with any Democratic votes or with getting enough Republican votes to just push this by a few weeks?
It's a great question, Becky, because remember, there is always going to be a group of Republicans who do not like these stopgap spending bills. They don't want to be continuing 2024 funding. They want to be doing 2025 funding because they want to be able to fight for spending cuts. And Democrats, in the meanwhile, they feel completely burned by this whole process. They spent months putting together a bipartisan spending bill only to get it yanked out from under them at the last minute. They've been referring to Elon Musk as President Musk because of his campaign against this. And so there's a lot of frustration on the Democratic side, and there is a sense that they are at a moment of leverage here. At the same point, I think, unfortunately, this is kind of falling to the political blame game. If there is a shutdown, who's going to be left holding the bag? Who are voters going to wind up blaming? You can already see it starting in the rhetoric here on Capitol Hill, and I think it might wind up playing a role as to whether we actually see a solution emerge today or whether lawmakers leave Capitol Hill with just either a short-term bill or even potentially just a shutdown.
Well, and President-elect Trump, his most recent comments that he just posted suggesting he'd rather see it done now than on his official watch when he comes in on this. He has lived through government shutdowns before, so if he's not going to be putting any political pressure on anybody to vote for anything, maybe Canada's more likely that it doesn't get done. We shall see. Emily, thank you. Emily Wilkins.
Next on Squawk Pod, how retaliation against President-elect Trump's proposed tariffs are hitting the bottle with CEO of whiskey distiller Michter's, Joe Magliocco. Plus, what else is taking a sip out of liquor profits from young people?
Daily marijuana use is actually larger at this point than daily alcohol use.
You're listening to Squawk Pod from CNBC, today with Becky Quick and Andrew Ross Sorkin. Here's Becky.
President-elect Trump delivering an ultimatum to the EU overnight. Sorry, I just took a drink right before we started.
Wow. You drinking the bourbon already?
No, this was just tea. About the possibility of tariffs if Europe doesn't ramp up its purchase of U.S. oil and gas. This raises the threat level for U.S. whiskey producers who are already bracing for the possibility of a 50% tariff on exports to the EU that is set to kick in automatically in March if officials in the U.S. and Europe don't reach a deal. So joining us right now is Joe Magliocco. He is the president of Michter's Distillery, also its parent company, Chatham Imports. And Joe, we talk to you every year at this time.
Yes, thank you so much for having me on.
It's great to have you here in person and talk through some of these things. But this threat of the threat of tariffs does make us think very quickly what this means for your business, because you have dealt with this in the past. Back in 2018,
Absolutely.
You all were targeted because you're the home in Kentucky of Senator McConnell. And so when tariffs were put on the U.S., some countries came back and very targetedly looked at leaders. You guys got hit front and center. Yeah.
I mean, look, tariffs are very complicated things, and I actually think it makes very good business sense that the incoming administration's talking about imposing tariffs on the EU. I believe that in 2022, our trade deficit with the EU was $130 billion.
Okay.
So it's very understandable that tariffs are being talked about. Now, if you look at it from the very narrow perspective, singular perspective of importing and exporting whiskey, obviously the industry would rather not have it.
Right.
And as you said before, from June 2018 to January 22, the EU imposed a retaliatory tariff on American whiskey. It wasn't 25%, it wasn't 50% like the one that's looming for the end of March this coming year. It was 25% tariff, and that had a big effect on American whiskey exports. American whiskey exports actually fell 20% during that period.
What did it mean for your business at the time?
We were fortunate. We actually wound up growing in that period, so we were an anomaly. But what happened was, like a lot of other companies, we worked with our local national partners in other countries to absorb part or all of the tariff increases.
So they took a big chunk of it.
So what happens is a lot of the companies wind up, having a reduced profitability during that period, even if they do maintain their sales.
Okay, so it didn't happen to you because you had a product that was so in demand. Your local partners.
Yeah, I mean, we allocate our stuff, and plus two, we have good local partners. We export to over 80 countries, but we were not alone. I mean, really, a lot of the industry wound up working with their local representatives in different countries to absorb part or even all of the price increases. And then what you also get too is you also get in anticipation of these big tariffs coming in, you also get big load-ins and transfers of inventory ahead of time.
Okay, so what are you doing to prepare for the idea of this 50% tariff that will kick in if there's not a deal that gets done? You must have been planning and trying to think around this for some time.
Crossing our fingers, pretty much. We do plan. We're already speaking to our local partners about if that does in fact happen, because the 25% tariff had a big impact, and 50% is going to have more. If you take a look, we were looking the other day at our pricing, in France, where we're doing well and growing nicely. A bottle of Michter's US1, our core entry item, will go from 67 euros to 88 euros. So that's a pretty big increase. Yeah. Unless we and our local partners absorb some of that, it's going to have an effect on volume. It has to.
We've already seen some impact to volume because just the spirits business in general took off during the pandemic.
Absolutely.
People were home. People started looking at bourbon, at all kinds of spirits very closely and buying. That dropped off. So describe just the state of the industry, tariffs aside.
Yeah, tariffs aside, the industry is going through an adjustment period. In 2023, U.S. spirit sales were down about 2%. If you take a look at the first 8 months of 24 calendar, spirit sales continue to be down. American whiskey sales are down, for example, at 2%. But a bright spot is that super premium American whiskey, $30 over, is actually up 6%. But we're dealing with a lot of different factors and a lot of new things that I think people are adjusting to. The GLP weight loss drugs, are a new thing. Online gambling, which reduces, discretionary income that people might spend in a liquor store or might spend going out to a restaurant or bar. That actually
people are spending more money gambling, and that as a result eats into what they would do going out.
I believe so. Gambling on the NFL alone this year is expected to be $35 billion.
And it's got to come from somewhere.
And so it's coming from somewhere. Anecdotally, I hear, some 30-somethings talking about friends that basically spend $400 a week in losses gambling.
Well, there's also a move among younger people, I think, to not drink. It's a healthier sort of, we're not going to drink, we're not going to imbibe at all.
And I think that part of that, too, is marijuana. Daily marijuana use is actually larger at this point than daily alcohol use.
I don't know what to root for in this situation.
But you're absolutely right. I saw a study that said that people legal drinking age at 24, 30% of them said that they're drinking less than last year. So, so you have marijuana, weight loss drugs, online gambling. You also, another factor that especially in chain stores has affected the industry is shoplifting. And and more goods are being put behind lock boxes and lock displays. And some studies indicate that when that happens, that volume can go down 20%.
Because people say, forget it, I'm not going to go ask somebody.
Exactly. They don't want to wait or whatever.
Yeah. So what do you do to combat all of those things? And I guess with the asterisk that you pointed out, for premium brands, the volume was actually up last year.
Exactly. As people drink less, it sounds trite, and people have said it for years in our industry, but people are somewhat drinking better. So that actually, I think, is long-term good for the profitability of the industry.
Where are your biggest sales? I was surprised to see that I know I've known this in the past, that you're importing to China, but how much of your business is going to China? How much is going to other places overseas?
It's substantial. A very substantial part of our business. And our export business, we're having a tremendous year for exports this year. Canada, we're up 25% this year, probably up similarly in China. We just won the Industry Brand of the Year award in China, which is a pretty big deal in China. It's a great market for us. So we export to over 80 markets, and it's a really important part of our business.
So again, looking at the tariffs, I know you think that it is a good thing that tariffs are being discussed as a
if you look at it as an American and what's good for the United States, I can certainly understand it, and I think it makes sense from the narrow perspective of trying to import and export, spirits. It's challenging, but the industry adjusts. There's talk of a 25% tariff on Mexican goods.
Yeah, you're bringing in mezcal.
Yeah, we Los Siete Mysterios, our mezcal, with a 25% tariff, that will go from $40 on the shelf to $47 on the shelf for our entry level.
So are you hoping that these are negotiations and that this is deal making in play, and that the tariffs don't actually come to fruition as they've been?
Yeah, I mean, look, putting pressure on the EU. The EU at this point has a 50% tariff looming on American whiskey. To
so
see some pressure put on the negotiation. To see a negotiation. Hopefully that 50% tariff doesn't happen or happens a lot less.
Okay. Joe, I want to thank you for coming in. Again, we always talk to you at this time of year, but it's really nice to have you here in studio.
It's wonderful. Thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
And Joe, we're not even drinking on the set this morning.
Yeah, we're not. This is, even though it's the same color, this is actually tea. I promise.
That is Squawk Pod for today, and it's Friday, so that's it for this busy week of the holiday season. Squawk Box is hosted by Joe Kernan, Becky Quick, and Andrew Ross Sorkin. Tune in weekday mornings on CNBC at 6 Eastern and get the very best of our show, the news you can't miss, right in your ears when you follow Squawk Pod wherever you get your podcasts. We'll meet you right back here on Monday. Have a great weekend.
We are clear. Thanks, guys.